Hi, and welcome to another episode of A Critic's Journey. And like I said at the start of these podcasts, I really wanted to, at times, go back and revisit films because of things that were happening in modern day. And of course, on January 1st, we're going to have the release of the Back to Hogwarts special, which is going to be on Binge here in Australia. So I thought, what better time than to go back and revisit the Harry Potter films. There's going to be a bit of talk on our radio show over the next few weeks about the Harry Potter films as we head into that very special being released. So I thought this would be the perfect time to actually go back and watch all of the Harry Potters in order. I did it a couple of years ago, and I have to admit that it just really told me why these films were so special. Now, today I went back and watched Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, which for some people who might be listening to this podcast in America, it is actually called Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, but it's the Philosopher's Stone for most of us. And I really thought that this was one of those films where I wondered if when I went back to watch it, would it kind of feel different, given now that we've watched the three main cast members grow up over the years. Would it be weird going back and watching them as kids in this first film? I also wondered whether the film would hold the magic that it did the first time that I saw the film. And I was remembering back, and I saw this film when it came out. There was someone very, very dear to me in my life at the time. Well, she's still in my life at the moment. And that is a someone that I see like a surrogate grandmother. And she was a huge fan of the Harry Potter books. And I have to admit, I hadn't actually read them when I first went to see the first film. Anyway, she was so excited about this Harry Potter film coming out. And her and I write a lot of stuff together. And she's an older person. I won't say her age because I don't want to embarrass her, but she's a fair bit older than me. And but we do a lot of writing together. In fact, she's still one of the people that I trust the most when it comes to my writing. And she talked me into going to see this movie, Harry Potter, with her. And at this stage, this is while I was in the middle of doing my film course. And I have to admit, I was still at that stage where I kind of didn't always want to rush out and see a blockbuster when it came out. While I was at film school, I learnt a lot more about art house films and a lot more about obscure kind of films. And that was what I used to spend my time going to watch. Of course, I loved the big action sci-fi films, but to be honest, I probably wouldn't have gone along to have seen a family fantasy like Harry Potter if it hadn't have been for her. I went along and I remember it blew me away. I was like, wow, this is like the fantasy films that I watched when I was a kid, but with much better special effects. I grew up reading a lot of English books. If I remember back to the books that my family had in the household for us kids to read, it was always books like The Famous Five or The Secret Seven or The Faraway Tree. And The Wishing Chair, stuff like that. And I guess the thing that really hit me when I first watched The Philosopher's Stone or The Sorcerer's Stone was that this film actually felt like Enid Blyton's writing. I know a lot of people out there are very critical of J.K. Rowling, but I think as a writer, she is a very, very good writer. She kind of captures that Enid Blyton style of fantasy that I think only British writers can really come up with. And I remember when I watched this film, I kind of thought back to the fantasy films that I loved when I was a kid. Things like Neverending Story. And it just just really blew me away. So now going back and revisiting it, I was wondering, would that magic still be there? And I'm recording this only about an hour after I watched the film, and I've got to say that that magic is still definitely there. Even though I was watching the film today and thinking, oh, I know what happens to that character, or I know what happens to that character, I still found myself being transported back to when this young Harry is learning that he's a wizard, and watching those moments at the very, very start of this film where he's with the Dursleys and learning, and Hagrid comes and tells him that you're a wizard and you've got to come to Hogwarts. Watching those scenes again, and I realized that even after 20 years, this film still really, really holds up. There are times when you do look at it and you think, oh, special effects have come a long way since they did that, but it still really works as a film. And I think one of the things I found really magical about this film, going back and watching it, was watching the performances of some of the actors. Robbie Coltrane is absolutely perfect as Hagrid. Alan Rickman as Snape. Snape was always one of my favourite characters, and going back and watching it, and I'll admit this is the first time I've gone back and watched Harry Potter since Alan Rickman passed away. He was so encapturing in that role. The one thing that did hit me this time, that I don't think I really realised before, was how many times different characters point out to the kids that Snape is actually trying to help them. It kind of always infuriated me when I watched this series, because I always had that kind of feeling that Snape was there for good and not for evil, even though that's not what the kids think throughout this film. And I realized that J.K. Rowling, and she knew where Snape was going to end up as a character, because I recently read that when they were doing this first film, she actually gave all this background information of Snape to Alan Rickman, because she wanted him to play the part, and she gave him all this background information about Snape so that he knew how to play that part. And at that time, the final books had never come out, but J.K. Rowling knew where the character was going to end up, and she told him exactly what was going to happen so that Alan Rickman could play the character with that in mind. And it's interesting to go back and watch this and see that Steve Kloves, the screenwriter, obviously was privy to some of that information as well, because he drops little hints all the way through this film about Snape. I also thought that the casting of these films were absolutely perfect. Rupert Grint, and the kids, they're just. It's really hard to go back and watch this film and not think about what these kids have done over the years now, but it's just absolutely perfect casting with Rupert Grint, Daniel Radcliffe, and Emma Watson. They got those castings so right, and they play their parts so well. It feels weird that we've kind of grown up watching them in those roles and watching them grow up. And I'm sure that's something I'm going to comment on later as I go through these films, just about how much we watch these kids grow up. But we've realised that all three of them have gone on to be very, very special actors over the years. And it's there from the very first moment you watch this film, because these kids, they would have known that they were going into something life-changing and something potentially that could have been bad for them. There were so many people out there that was eagerly anticipating this movie. If any of those three kids had not done a good job, people would have let them know for sure. It would have been all over the internet that these kids had done a terrible job and that the casting was all wrong and stuff like that. And they didn't. They absolutely nailed it. And I think Tom Felton the same. Going back and watching a young Tom Felton, after seeing him in movies like Belle and the Planet of the Apes series, it's interesting going back and watching him, because we know now that he has become such an interesting actor. To go back and watch him as a kid in this series is really, really fun to go back and do. So, look, the first time I ever watched Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, I gave it 3.5 out of 5. I'm actually going to up that a little bit now that I've watched it again. I'm going to give it 4 out of 5. So that's a little bit of a half-star rating, just because this film really, really holds its own, I think, even after all these years. So I'm going to give it 4 out of 5, and now I'm going to go and watch number 2 in the series.